establishing a data-driven culture, launching any successful citywide strategy grounded in equity requires data. Russ Carson from Playcore will share strategies and examples for driving a data-driven culture to improve adequate access to safe, high-quality parks, trails, and green infrastructure in your city. Take it away, Russ.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for hanging in here during nap time. And I hope for the next few minutes you pretty fired up about something passionate to myself, and that is the four-letter word known as data. So yes, Russ Carson, a research advisor with Playcore, waiting for our slides to come up. And I'm thrilled for the last 3 years to take the leap of faith from academics for the last 20 years into this fun space of translation and implementation of research. And we do that at Playcore. Many of you are familiar with this. We have a table outside with all kinds of free resources where we connect with the research and researchers, as many of some are in the room, and try to distill that and make it accessible through resources, education, and as we continue to grow these services around data and data support. So back to that four-letter word, data. For some of you, it might feel kind of scary, right? Where do I find data? How do I collect data? What is data? I like this image on the right. It can be all kinds of things, right? And it can range from numbers to words to visualizations now to maps. The bottom line is there's a lot of it out there. Where do you find it? How do you trust it? Has it been vetted and validated? And at the end of the day, can it help you do your job and do it well? And the goal is to take these different pieces of data, and today we're talking about how it can help elevate issues of equity and help tell that story in a useful manner. So for the next few minutes, very broad level approach here. We can dive deeper into all these objectives in a follow-up conversation over coffee, but we're going to talk about the benefits, we're going to talk about the ways, and we're going to end with some nice stories of examples. So the benefits. You may be familiar with this, and you may have already come across this in your job, right? Making decisions, and those decisions are driven oftentimes by passion, by stories, and anecdotes, and what I'm here to say is hopefully you're integrating data into that decision making. Making the case and using the right data to help make that case, and at the end of the day, a lot of us really, really want to show the outcomes, the meaningful outcomes to show the impact. And we're not always have the time to do that, and that can be quite challenging. So certainly that can be a benefit as we work through that. From decision making, I love this Venn diagram. Think of what has happening at the organizational level in terms of the services you're offering, the operations and programming, and how you're allocating budget, which was said previously for our previous presenter, right? That oftentimes drives your purpose. But I like to think that also data can help that as well in terms of what access is available, who's benefiting, who's being burdened when it comes to your community around green spaces, race, poverty, and of course all kinds of holistic health outcomes. And in the middle, you can find a space with data to help elevate the issues of equity in your community and in your organization. Decision making around case making. We all have a story to tell. We all want to tell that story with defending and finding more money and investments. Oftentimes that can be just money that's available internally, but money that's available externally. And we're so thankful in the last several years in the world of nature and nature-based programming, there's a lot of external grants available, but oftentimes you need to make the case for that money, and data can certainly help with that. And at the end of the day, we hope that data can help you be more transparent with your decisions, right? And utilizing that to raise public awareness of current trends and issues facing in your community. Impact is a big one. Certainly comparing trends over time, comparing differences from before and after programs, and you can do that for measuring site outcomes. And of course, the challenge is putting it into reports that resonate with your stakeholders. Let's move on to different ways to do this. I like to advocate for a holistic approach, that we're not too siloed in how we're approaching data. I like to also advocate for this is integrated in ongoing fashion throughout the whole project lifespan, And lastly, and you'll hear some good examples after our talk here around different ways you can integrate community and input. We've been working really hard for the last, 18 months of trying to come up with a framework in a holistic manner to show and help articulate the value of all that you all play in your cities, right? We often know it, but we struggle with how to articulate it. We're calling it community vitality. We know you're vital to what you do in your community, but maybe oftentimes struggle with the way to position that. This is one way to do it, and of course, I would argue putting data into every one of these slices can certainly provide a holistic approach to do that. And we're hearing that from some folks in the network around that. Across the lifespan, whether it be early for making the case, whether it be during, once the projects are off and running and going with your programs, and the big thing is the post. The data that you do collect and or driving what you do is put together into storytelling reports. And lastly, again, this is broad stroke here. I can talk a lot more about this, and here's some examples of having a robust community engagement plan throughout all phases of the project. So now the fun part. I'm going to finish with some nice fun stories of different communities and cities that have been trying to integrate data into various phases of their projects. This one is out in Hoover, Alabama, not too far from here. You can see what was currently existing and what they're trying to do. We would call this a national demonstration site, working with many researchers and scholars to help us understand what that looks like. Yes, it's a play space, but it's actually an intentional play space. It's based on evidence in terms of the design, evidence around how to promote more physical activity in youth, how to actually bring people to nature. You can see some planting pockets that are purposely planted in the middle of the space. Of course, over time, that's going to provide a nice canopy, as well as an inclusive space for the whole child, not just for physical needs. So our program is National Demonstration Sites. Many of you are familiar with this. We have all kinds of resources outside, but it's not just inclusion, physical activity, and adolescence for fitness. It's also for including nature. And you can see that for nature grounds and pathways for play. So the balance of nature and play space, as well as bringing people to nature through trails and connectivity. What happens in many of these sites is data is naturally collected through the key informant, which is the main site manager, through on-site QR codes and signage. Thank you, COVID. We know how to use those now. That it all can be bundled together for you in a simple report. And some of the examples that came from Hoover, in this one example, is all kinds of things around age groups, and there's some level of intergenerational impact here, around satisfaction levels, around how active the average person is in that group. Again, this is self-report, so we know there's challenges with that, but nonetheless, it's better than nothing. How powerful is this when you ask people, why did you come to the site? And it's not just for physical activity. That was number 3. In this particular case, social emotional health was the number 1 reason visitors to the site were recording why they were there, for the connectivity and the emotional stress that was released. It's also how long they're staying there. And when you balance this data with what we know in the literature, right, from these sound bites on the right, we know that 20 minutes, in fact, you all know 10 minutes out in nature can have the benefits of health. This community is well beyond that in terms of the average visitor. Many, many folks have been asking around growing schoolyards. Many folks are doing this around the country. We're so thrilled to connect with Children in Nature Network to kind of help identify what is it, what are the key design principles, as well as the holistic benefits from that approach. It's a nice resource outside. I think we actually ran out. Maybe the Children in Nature Network table has additional ones, but you can certainly sign up and we'll send you one as well. This is just one example of this play yard in a growing green schoolyard. And again, data was driven behind the design for this in terms of the holistic benefits as well as the resources needed to make it happen. Nature grounds. Look at the rendering on the upper right. Intentionality around the naturalization of play spaces. Look at all the planting pockets. Look at all the entrance. Look at the boundaries that are used for greenery. And over time, you can only imagine what a space like that can become. And that's what working with our friends at Natural Learning Initiative helps us understand, is the balance of nature and play spaces can really bring people there and have them stay longer. And my last example is a wonderful story around using trails, existing trails. Look at the image on the bottom right in blue. That was an existing trail that was outside a botanical garden center, and it wasn't utilized. And as you can see, it certainly was an opportunity to draw people closer to nature. And so they utilized what was already existing, and just by putting some play spaces, some play pockets along the way to draw people further into nature. Oh, and by the way, Those play spaces were ones that were taking what the learning was happening in the Botanical Center and outside. You can see this is the metamorphosis of, from a butterfly. So it's playful, it's learning, and it's fun. And there's many pockets along this trail. This is around mushrooms, a little place feature there, as well as a place to socialize, as well as the trail ended around a pond. And you can see a fun little dragonfly there with some learning, and even some just for kids fun facts to engage with. Simple, intentional, data-driven. So with that, we all know data is precious. I wish you luck on that journey of utilizing data. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer those at this point. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Russ. Are there any questions for Russ? Well, Russ, I think there's one right here.
Yes, please.
What are your thoughts around maintenance with some of these nature parks? I'm a parks and recreation director that always comes up.
Yeah.
What level of maintenance with, incorporating nature into that?
Yeah, that's the one that comes up a lot, especially when you have intentional pockets within spaces. It's the decision to make, right? How important is the value of integrating nature versus the managing of the maintenance? So yes, it's certainly an issue to consider. And if you feel the value is well beyond this, maybe the challenge of maintenance, we would encourage you to move forward with that decision because we know the benefits are quite large and holistic.
All right, thank you, Russ. So you've grounded yourself in equity and collected data to determine a path forward. Now you may consider how to build public will. A Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights can provide this framework, which you can see in the handouts that are distributed on your table. The City of Rochester embarked on this journey. Stephanie Benway and Jasmine Chastain are going to take us through their process and outcomes for developing a COBOR.